paper, a little 3x5 card, and a pencil. And you can write down your question and pass it right back down to us. So Maria and I will be on both ends collecting questions as we go. And then approximately the last 15 minutes or so, starting at around noon, we'll kind of break off from the main presentation and then jump into a Q&A and hopefully get you out of here right on time at around 12:15. I was told that this runs in your lunchtime, just in case we run a couple minutes over, just asking for people to be a little bit patient with us because I know that everybody's hungry and get antsy after a while, but we're going to try to wrap this as close to 12:15 as possible. And so with that, are we ready to go? Okay, so then I'm going to briefly introduce our guests. Really quick, on the slide deck is my friend Margot. Margot, just briefly tell us a little bit about you.
Oh, hi guys, I'm Margot. I am a communications organizer in the labor movement, and I used to work at KPBS. That's how I know Mick, and I'm trying to help out with the tech stuff.
All right, very good. And we also have today live my friend Ron. This is Ron Auerbacher, and Ron is one of the founders of the Gay Liberation Front. As I mentioned, that's something from more than 50 years ago. He's going to give you some information about how that all started and his involvement with this work. And we also have joining us another founder, John Knabel. And I'm going to let each of our original founders introduce themselves. And we also have Martha Shelley, who is joining us remotely as well. And I want to give each and every one of them a quick round of applause, and then we'll let them introduce themselves.
Hi, so my name is Ron Auerbacher, and I actually want to begin with Martha, because I joined the Gay Liberation Front, which was the activist movement that formed after the Stonewall street riots. Raise your hand a moment if you do not know what that was. Okay. There were street riots where people in a bar being raided by the police fought back, and then people on the street in Greenwich Village and Manhattan in New York City started to fight back, and that went on for 3 nights. I joined about 8 months this activist organization, but Martha was there. So I'd like to start by letting Martha speak, because she was actually there at the beginning. Oh, okay.
So what happened was on the night.
One minute, Martha. We need to increase the sound.
That's not me. How do we turn the? Oh, he's got it. Try again, Martha.
Okay. You know, what happened was on the night of Stonewall, or one of the nights anyway, it was Saturday night, June 28th, 1969. I was giving 2 women a tour of Greenwich Village in New York City. And I came across these people who were young people throwing things at cops. I thought it was an anti-Vietnam War demonstration. I had been in a number of them. So I walked on by because I didn't want to get my friends involved. I mean, they were just visiting from Boston. And then it was Monday morning, I found out that it was the Stonewall riot, that it was gay people rioting. So I called the woman who was head of Daughters of Bolinas, the lesbian organization at the time, and said, we need to have a protest march. She said, call the men's organization. I did that. And anyway, got the groups to jointly sponsor a protest march. That first march, which I was one of the organizers, happened exactly 1 month after Stonewall. And those of us who were organizing, our little group formed the Gay Liberation Front. And that was it. We basically formed it 1 week after Stonewall, and then it grew. And the first march that we had was maybe 400, 500 people. 1 year later, 10,000 gay people, gays, bi, trans, whatever, marched through the city of New York and ended up at Central Park. And then and of course it grew. It was all over the country, all over the world, that gay people were coming out and demonstrating and demanding our rights.
Let's keep John a second.
John?
Hi there, John Knable. I was also in New York. I was attending graduate school at New York University when a friend of mine in class said, "Have you heard of the Gay Liberation Front? It's just started." Well, as a gay person who was first coming out of the closet, to hear that there was an organization of gay people, well, of course, I went in November. So in November of 1969, I started attending meetings. And Martha is correct. She was one of the main speakers early on with a group that grew from, maybe 40 people, 40 or 50 people when we first arrived. We began meetings of about 200 people. And in addition to organizing the first Gay Pride March to celebrate the 1-year anniversary of the Stonewall riot, we also do a lot of other stuff. We believe from the very beginning in intersectionality. So we supported anti-war demonstrations. We met with Black Panthers, actually, in person. But we created a whole new organization that's quickly across the country. Find that the people in Los Angeles, maybe 3 months later after us, started the Gay Liberation. Gay Liberation Front became probably about 35 to 40 organizations across the country. And it was in first burst of great political activity, gay people, men, women, transgender people demanding rights for the first time.
I want to add to what John just said. Before that, there were a couple of gay organizations in the United States, very few of them. And what they did was ask to be included in the United States just the way it was. Just please let us be in the middle class, let us have corporate jobs, etc. Don't fire us, and so on. And they avoided getting involved with any other organizations. It was just single issue. What we did, what we now call intersectionality, was join forces with other groups like the Black Panthers, like the National Organization for Women. We pushed them to demand lesbian rights, like the Young Lords, a Puerto Rican group. And by allying with all of these other groups, we really did change America, because the little gay groups could be ignored by the system and were ignored. But when we came on and made all these alliances, and I think this is an important thing for all of you young people to understand, making alliances with other groups is what gives you power.
Maybe this is a good time to go through the slides briefly.
Sure, yeah,
Okay. Could you go back to this?
I sure can. Let's go to the presentation mode and let's look at some slides. I just want to make sure you're not muted. Okay, you're good.
Okay.
Which
And then
one?
you can blow that up.
This one?
No, I mean, oh,
Oh,
it was as big as the screen before.
Yep.
Okay. John and Martha, I'm just going to briefly show some pictures because, as they say, it's worth 1,000 words. So the Gay Liberation Front, in a sense, was a jokey name for the organization because the United States had invaded Vietnam, which was in a civil war, somehow mistakenly believing that this tiny little country could harm the United States, which was ridiculous. But there was a theory that communism could spread all over the world. The army that was fighting the American invasion was called the North Vietnamese Liberation Front. So the title, and Martha was there at the meeting, was a kind of a joke, but it was also serious because we were using the word gay in public for the first time. While, as Martha mentioned, other, like a lesbian organization was the Daughters of Bilitis. It was understood what that was about, but there was no explicit LGBT word in the title. So it was a joke, but it was serious. And it also included the word liberation and all the manifestations of what that meant. So Martha was mentioning that through working with other groups and through efforts, because this seemed to come at the right moment, 1 year later, next slide, there were thousands, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 people marching in New York City. In only 1 year that we went from 40 people in a church to thousands marching, including marches in other cities. And now if you go to a Pride March, raise your hand if you've been to a Pride March here in San Diego. Yeah, next slide. You have, like in New York City, 500,000 people or hundreds of thousands of people in, and whether we believe it or not, I'm going to assert that we're all swimming in history and all the events that take place. Like right now, you know, we're in a huge historical moment where wealthy, undemocratic people want to fundamentally alter some of the rights and privileges that we've enjoyed for almost 100 years that we take for granted, such as you're relatively inexpensively attending a community college. We take that for granted, but that was hard fought for, that if your parents are laid off, there's unemployment benefits, that we have health care, particularly in California. Right now, we're in a historical moment where wealthy people do not want to pay taxes and basically don't care about the general population, in my opinion. And we're in this moment now. And I'm also going to assert that if you make an effort, you can make a tremendous difference. I could never personally have imagined that 40 people in a church within 1 year could have gathered hundreds of thousands of people to march. Let's go back to the slides. Keep going.
Okay. Which one? This one? This next one?
Just keep going.
Okay.
I also know that my family fled Nazi Germany. Raise your hand if you have ever seen these pictures before. You understand. So had my family not left Germany, had Martha's family not left Europe previously, our families would have been murdered in the concentration camps. And we, as children, Martha, John, and I were, you could say, swimming in the history of the civil rights movement. Have you seen these kind of photos before? And you know about Dr. King? Next. Yeah. I'm going to go pretty quickly, John and Martha, give you more time to speak. So as a little boy, my mother and I used to watch this on TV. This influenced us, that people going out in the streets, that organizing could make a difference. Yeah. I was about 13 when Dr. King gave this speech. Yeah. When he was assassinated, students were assassinated on college campuses. Can you imagine the National Guard coming onto Mesa College campus and shooting students for protesting the Vietnam War? It happened, you know. There was riots all over the country. There was an emerging women's movement. People like my mother who were very bright. She hated being a housewife. She didn't like to cook. She didn't like to wear makeup. She wanted to ride her bike. And my father thought that was terrible. Didn't allow her to get a job. She would have been much happier to have a life besides just doing laundry. Things that you women take for granted now, you know, that you have a lot more choices. This is all due to human effort. So we were also influenced by seeing the protests of the Vietnam War. Yeah. Go on. And Martha was part of this early so-called homophile movement. Can we hear Martha's voice? Do you want to say anything about this, Martha?
Sure. What happened was in 1967, I joined the Daughters of Bilitis. I was just looking to meet other women. I was not where lesbians met in those days was, you know, if you knew somebody privately or you'd go to the bars. Well, I was a complete dud in the bars. I'm not a drinker, that sort of thing. So I joined the Daughters of Bilitis. I heard about it. And they made me the public speaker because I was young and articulate and willing to do that and didn't have a career that I was liable to lose. I think I was 23 at the time, you know, just doing some odd jobs and stuff. And that when the Stonewall riot came, I was giving a tour of two women from Boston who wanted to start a chapter of the Daughters of Bilitis. I should also back up and say that my first political actions in public were in 1963 when I was 19 and first left home and started protesting against the Vietnam War. And so year after year, I would go to Washington and protest. And again, my family would have been wiped out in Europe. My mother's relatives who weren't able to get out were killed in the Warsaw Ghetto. And I grew up knowing about that. Grew up, my best friend in middle school was Black, and I was horrified seeing what was going on in the South and thinking that could be happening to her. So all of that formed my political consciousness when I was growing up.
Yeah. So now we want to show you some photos of the efforts we made in the Gay Liberation Front. That's me on the left in both photos. One thing we did is we went out and demonstrated in the streets. If there are things you're passionate about, maybe even changes you want to make at Mesa College that the administration is resistant to, how are you going to get your voices heard? There are many ways, but one way is to go out and make a public demonstration and say, and get other people together. We care passionately about this issue. We also started living together, which for me personally helped me feel better about myself, because at that time, homosexuality was a psychiatric diagnosis. As soon as I told a psychiatrist that I was ashamed that I thought other boys were attractive, they were afraid I was going to kill myself, and I was put in the mental hospital for 3 years. Living with other people, somehow this got
Oops.
on its side, I don't know. Anyway, we went camping together, we lived together, we had multiple discussions together. What we called at the time, this is Martha as a young woman, what we called consciousness raising. John, do you want to say anything? Do you want to describe what consciousness raising was?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Just to mention, I cannot see any of the slides that are being shown. They're not on my screen here. So I'm not exactly sure what you've been showing.
You can't see them
Consciousness.
either.
Yeah, that's our limitation.
Okay. Well, one of the early things that was introduced to the Gay Liberation Front was something called consciousness raising. uh, there were people who had been with a group for longer, and people wanted to become involved in gay liberation. So a number of small groups, I think there were at least 20 or 30 functioning in 1972, 71, 72, of gay people came and shared their experiences. And because we had someone who was directing it, we're seeing these things as political actions for the first time in their lives. Their, 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 their whole childhood, when homosexuality was looked down on, when people would be afraid to say anything about their attraction to another person of the same gender. That this all was something that we all shared. So each week, a group of 10 or so would gather with a subject like coming out, or like relationship with parents. Um, it's really just a long list of things that everybody shared and discovered that they were not alone in the world. Uh, and that we really did share experiences, and it strengthened, I have to say, the organization very, very much as people began to talk politically about what homosexuality was. That it always discussed previously as a psychiatric problem. Now we understood that there was a politics around being gay, and it spread across the country. I think that's consciousness raising was a device that was used certainly in New York and in Washington and in Los Angeles, uh, and it very much strengthened the knowledge, the intersection, the working together of the groups.
John or Martha, do you want to say something, a little more what you mean by that being gay was political? What could you delve into that a little deeper?
Yeah, I can say something about that. There was something that came out of the women's movement, which I was also involved in, a saying, if you want to call it that, the personal is political. What we do personally is interconnected with the politics of the time. The fact that women couldn't, a married woman couldn't get credit in her own name, that we were discriminated against on jobs, that gay people were considered crazy. All of this forming our lives was political, that Black people were discriminated against, go down the list, that you couldn't get a particular job, that you could get fired from a particular job, what you thought about yourself as a result of this constant onslaught of propaganda is political. It's all connected. It's not just your personal failings, for instance.
The
And
way I thought there was something wrong with me.
exactly. How much time do we have left? Because some things I want to say to these young people.
No, please continue.
Okay. You can learn from some of the stuff we did, but we can't tell you, we can't write a program for you that you can follow and everything is going to be okay. Just the same as what we did. We had to figure it out. And our previous generation, on whose shoulders we stood, really, they couldn't tell us how to change things. Right now, what you're looking at, what we're all looking at, is an administration that's trying to take away all of our rights, that is trying to bring us back not just to the 1950s, where gays and women were treated the way we were, and Blacks, but back to the 1850s. There are people who call themselves conservatives who think slavery was just fine because Black people learned skills, right? They want to bring things back to the 1850s or worse. Just read what they say. And just, what was it, yesterday? Trump gives a medal, the Medal of Freedom, to a guy who was, read what he had to say, Charlie Kirk, racist, sexist, anti-gay, and who thought that it was okay that whole bunches of people get killed every year by guns because that's the price of defending our freedom. I don't think Mr. Kirk expected that he would be one of the people sacrificed to gun rights. I'm still pissed about that. But as I said, you've got to figure out how to move things around. We can't tell you how to do it. All we can do is share our experiences, and you can figure out where to go from there.
Quick interruption.
Yeah. 1 minute, 1 minute.
A brief moment of pause for just a second. If anybody has any questions right now, we're sort of getting closer to that 12 o'clock mark, and I'd love to see if there's any students that have any questions. What I'll do is just discreetly raise your hand, and I'll walk around and make sure you get a card and a pencil. So just keep your hand in the air until I get that around, and I'll be out there. Let's keep going.
Well, maybe they could just ask the question out loud.
They can, but let's get them a light.
Okay. So they're, John and Martha, they're writing questions on their cards.
Excellent. I think that's really make it more valuable to the audience to really know what's on your
that was
mind.
good.
What are you
Yeah.
thinking about?
Instead of
What
just
questions
they can
might
see
you
it.
Yeah.
have for us?
Yeah.
Let's keep going.
Okay.
Okay, let's get everybody back. We're gonna continue on. I want to make sure we honor the time.
Anyway, I would say one of the big takeaways is each one of you in your own way, each of you has different creative skills, from sports to music to tech skills to organizing to public speaking to writing to math skills. Each of you has a unique ability to contribute to a better world in your own way. And as Martha said, we can't tell you exactly what to do, but if you feel passionately that in the simplest possible way we ought to live, and we have the now wealth and power and connectivity of the internet to create a planet that's equitable, fair, creative, just, where people are treated respectfully regardless of race, gender, sexual, gender orientation, country in which they grew up. It's all possible now. It's not for lack of creative ideas and imagination. What can each of you contribute to making that possible? You can make an enormous difference. I never, ever could have imagined going to a meeting of 30 people in a church that there would be a high school where you could have this kind of assembly or congregate with each other openly, or have these teachers who support you instead of reporting you to the police or your parents. You know, what can you do to continue that momentum? Each of you can make an enormous difference, even when you don't believe what I'm saying. Are we gonna have some questions now?
You could. So I've gone through a couple of these, and so I'll choose one here that I thought was a pretty strong one. Actually, this is related to the questions. There were two questions that we had from students in the audience about the Black Panthers. One person said, "What are the Black Panthers?" And the second one was, can you speak here on how you work with the Black Panthers? Speak more on how you work with the Black Panthers.
John.
Well, the Black Panthers was the most radical organization of the Black Power movement, and it's because of course people like Martin Luther and others had been working for improved life and experiences, the rights for years. And by the 1960s, there was something else in the air, and people became much more what you could call radical. The street movements, street demonstrations, a great deal of much more serious thought. Huey Newton was the head of the Black Panther Party, and he was accused of a crime, and he was actually in prison for 2 years. The months that he first came out, he reorganized and re-energized the Black Panther Party. And to my surprise, one of the first things he did in a visit to New York City was to want to meet with the Gay Liberation Front people, because he recognized that we were at the same level of, well, not as organized, not as many people were involved, but that we would be of the radical mindset that he could work with. So he actually asked to meet with us. I was one of the 3 people who met with him, and for about a half an hour, he spoke about his experiences in prison with gay prisoners and how many times he'd talked to them and began to understand the injustice that gays and lesbians in America were being exposed to. I mean, so he wanted to work with us, and he asked us to please come and do joint demonstrations with the Black Panthers. And the Black Panthers at that time also had several large meetings, one in Philadelphia and one in Washington, with about 10,000 people attending each meeting. And gays and lesbians were invited to attend. And they were going to be writing a basic new statement of rights for Black people in America. So the work of the convention went on, but the inclusion of the gays and lesbians was something that was remarkable. Absolutely, to have that kind of involvement with radical politics in the 1960s, to be actually invited. A great number of people, I would say about 150 gays and lesbians from cities across the country came to these 2 conventions. And it was very important for us because we had not ever spoken with people from Los Angeles, from Las Vegas, from Texas, who were watching the work we were doing in New York and modeling gay liberation movements in their cities on what we were doing in New York. It was an incredible experience, and I'm so grateful to the Panthers for getting us together at that time.
Okay, we have another question here from a student. This is a deep one. So let's see. Maybe Ron or right, they are. Maybe Ron or Martha has got an answer for this. It says, "Do you have any advice for staying safe while protesting?"
No, I can tell you that. If you look at what's going on right now with ICE, or look at what happened, for instance, when Black people tried to cross this Pettus Bridge, was it in Alabama, demonstrating, and the cops beat them through, turned high pressure fire hoses on them. There is no way. I mean, you may stay safe. The majority of people do, but it is a risk. And we're dealing with a fascist government. Let's not mince words here. We're dealing with a government that wants, from everything that I've seen in the papers, wants to provoke violence so that they can declare martial law and forget about any elections or anything else in the future. We're dealing with an American Gestapo, and it's risky. Things may go well, they may not go well, but I can tell you that if we don't stand up, if we don't get out there and demonstrate and do everything that we can, not just demonstrate, there are all kinds of tactics. We will definitely succumb to fascism in this country. Right now, it might still be possible to stop it.
All right, here's another question.
Oh, man,
Yeah, go ahead.
Have you seen video of the protests in Portland that are using humor to push back? And that seems to be keeping people in Portland safe for now. Dressing in funny costumes, using music, particularly making it clear that do you know that this coming Saturday, there'll be enormous demonstrations all over the country. I hope you'll all come and bring as many of your friends and family as possible, and use humor to.
I live in Portland, and it is essentially a peaceful city. What's happening here is there's a handful of people demonstrating at ICE headquarters, with music and funny costumes and so on. And then everybody else is going about their business. I spent part of yesterday harvesting tomatoes when I could, feeding the chickens in my backyard. People are out there riding their bicycles. Oh, we had the naked bike ride. Hundreds of people with no clothes on, riding around on their bicycles and ending up at ICE headquarters. And what could ICE do? They're going to, turn fire hoses or something on a bunch of naked people on their bicycles.
Humor is a wonderful way, because you're going against the propaganda that this is a violent city.
Just to be clear, we're not endorsing going naked. just to make sure. Okay, so our next question is, you talked about the importance and power of alliances. What do you think keeps minority groups from forming alliances more often and uniting for rights and power?
I would say propaganda. Back in the late part of the 19th century, a robber baron named Jay Gould was reported to have said, and I'm kind of believe he did, I can hire half the working class to shoot the other half. And there's been plenty of propaganda that, drives people to dislike or distrust another group within their society. For instance, all of the anti-trans propaganda, they focus on one most vulnerable group, and let's divide up the gay people. Then who's next? They start with the most vulnerable. They start with people who there's racist feelings about. And it's very important to counteract that propaganda, to reach out. Ron, should I tell that story about my neighbors?
Oh, please. This is yeah.
Okay, so when we moved in, our neighbors were Christian fundamentalists. But they were nice people. And I was told by an old gay friend, you can't be friends with those people. Well, we ignored him. We did gardening together and stuff. And I remember talking with one of those neighbors, and we were talking about the origins of the world. And she said that she thought that the world was what was it, 5 to 10,000 years old as described in Genesis. And what I said in response was, well, I kind of go with the astronomers who say it's about 4 billion years old. But what do I know? I wasn't there at the time. So make it light, not saying you're stupid or something like that. And just be friends with people. Now, this is going to work with some. What ended up happening was they came over to our side. Uh, and we're all very close right now. We're like family. Now, this works with some people. With others, it's like, forget about it. There's some other Christian fundamentalists in our town who think we are evil, spawn of Satan, and they're not going to change and they're not interested. But there's an awful lot of people out there who just want what an elderly German woman once told me. She's long gone. Most people just want food, food for themselves and their families, a roof over their heads, and a good education for their children. And those are the people you want to reach out to.
All right, we have another question from the audience. This student says, what fears and obstacles did you have when fighting for gay rights, and how did you overcome them?
Well, the answer that comes to mind for me is the community. As I mentioned, living together gave me courage, gave me a reflection that there was nothing wrong with me. And on that first march, what we now call a Pride March, 1 year after the Stonewall Rebellion, I was really scared, but I was also surrounded in this. We didn't know would people attack us from the sidewalk. I was scared, but being in community, being in group, being with, supporting each other. John? Oh, do you have a story about the first march, John? Yeah.
Which one?
You were beaten up.
Well, yes, that was the night. That was the night before the first march. New York University sponsored a gay dance, and about 200 people showed up. It was contemporary music. A lot of men and women were dancing together. At about 10:30, 11 o'clock, the four other fellows I was with, we said it's time to go. And we were going to head to the subway. On our way, we passed a car with 4 men in it who shouted out faggots, and we just ignored them and we kept going. Unfortunately, 2 got out, 2 drove the car ahead, and we were attacked. Unfortunately, I was smashed. My head was banged into the sidewalk, and I was hospitalized. One of the others had a broken ankle. This was what we had to deal with in those days. But we both, him in a wheelchair and me with a huge bandage on my head, we marched in that first march. It's just that kind of strength that you're right, and if whatever occasion arises, to go out and be yourselves and be strong and be visible.
Also, going onto their turf and challenging them, like gay people went and did what we call the ZAP of the American Psychiatric Association. They were having their conference, and some of us came in and challenged them, and they ended up saying, okay, homosexuality is not a disease. But we challenged them, and they took that out of their diagnostic book.
Yes, I think that was in about 1973, after we were organized for only about 3 or 4 years, but we got our message across.
And when you're, go ahead.
People were not immediately sent into sanitariums because they came out as gay. It was understood that there was a healthy way, a healthy lifestyle. Excuse me.
with the National Organization for Women, they were pretty homophobic. What they didn't want was that to be called, that they were feminists because they hated men and that they were, quote, man-hating dykes. So they had a conference in New York City at a local middle school, and a bunch of us showed up wearing Lavender Menace T-shirts. They had called us the Lavender Menace, or it was Betty Friedan, the leader of National Organization for Women, who called us that. And we had those T-shirts covered with other shirts, so they didn't know who was coming in. It was called the Congress to Unite Women. One of us shut off the lights to the auditorium, and then when they turned the lights back on, we took off those shirts, and we had the Lavender Menace T-shirt visible. My job was to jump up on the stage, big mouth Martha, right? Grab the mic and talk about and say to the audience there, who were, mostly straight women, that why we were here, that lesbians were being excluded from the National Organization for Women and so on. And I asked the audience, do you want to hear from the original panel? There was, a woman from the unions, a Black woman, and so on. What do you want to hear from us this time? And they all voted to hear from us. And by the end of the year, when they had a national conference, they put in lesbian rights as part of the demands for the National Organization for Women. So it was not just that we were out in the streets, it was also that we went to them and challenged them, like they did with the Psychiatric Association, with other groups, challenged them and went into their space and got them to change.
I'm going to break off just to a little aside and note that with this last question about violence or fears that people face, I also want to acknowledge that that's a current concern for the LGBTQIA community as well. It hasn't just disappeared in the past 50 years. This is not going to be any kind of a foreign concept to any of you, but LGBTQIA youth are far more likely to be bullied. Not because they are LGBT, but because people have a problem with them being LGBTQIA, and they face a variety of different discriminatory barriers that prevent them from accessing schools in a safe and inclusive way. This event today is about providing some visibility to the history, but also acknowledging that we still continue to face some of these struggles with all kinds of different demographics of students, and we want to make it into a super safe and inclusive spot. All right, I think we've got time for one last question. And Ron, you were going to mention something about.
If you would like to learn more, we're going to have a program tomorrow, which you can attend at 4:00 at the big LGBT Center in Hillcrest. You can attend in person. You can attend on Zoom. If you just Google the center, LGBT Center Hillcrest, events, October 16th tomorrow, there's a registration form if you'd like to attend on Zoom, and they'll send you the Zoom link. So you might have questions that didn't get answered today that you can ask tomorrow, and we'll be there as well.
I want to say,
or you can come in person.
I want to briefly say thank you to all the students who floated questions. We're running out of time. We don't have time for everybody's, but thank you so much to the people who put some time into thinking about some really qualitative questions. I'm going to try to end on a relatively positive note, hopefully not too gloom and doom, but this question I think is a good way to end this. So for all three of you, do you have hope for our future?
Oh, absolutely. I think every generation steps forward when they need to make sure that their lives and the lives of their friends and their families are safe. I am very positive about this. I think Trump is going to be gone in 2 years. I think that we are going to have a return to a much more reasonable America. You may not believe it, but it's not going to happen unless we do something. We get in the streets. We get online. We talk to our friends. We talk to our relatives. And we get there and we do something. do not sit back and let it happen.
My hope for the future is you guys, you young people. And I just wanted to say that if any of you want to contact me and talk some more, Ron can give you my contact information.
The more effort you make, the better our future, right? And we're facing not only the threat to democracy, but the threat to the climate on the planet, nuclear weapons, the misuse of AI. What can you do together to make a difference?
People, I would love to just continue on with the discussion, but I know we're running into lunch, so I'm just going to briefly say a couple of acknowledgments. First, I want to give a quick shout out to Matthew and our tech crew that helped us with this, so let's give them a hand. Thank you to Margaret Forrest, who's been super instrumental in the live stream. Thank you to all of you for showing up. Thanks for the educators and the teachers and folks that help support this event.
Oh yeah, let me turn it. See if I can get it to turn all the way around.
Please shout out to my department.
Oh, there they are.
And
So good to see you.
We're youth advocacy. We're the ones that help pull this together. And I also want to just especially say, let's give them a really big hand for Ron, Martha, and John. All right, thank you. That concludes our program. Thank you all so much for coming. Please pick up after yourself.